At dawn, Prince William broke royal silence, confirming tragic news about Prince Louis's latest diagnosis. No spin, no protocol, just a father's truth. The palace paused, the country listened, and everything changed. What was revealed reshaped the family's future and forced the monarchy to face a reality it couldn't hide anymore. The truth breaks. William confirms Louis's diagnosis. The moment Prince William confirmed tragic news about Prince Louis marks one of the most emotional chapters in modern royal history. After weeks of silence, all eyes were on the palace when William stepped forward, not in ceremonies or scripted speeches, but with genuine emotion, revealing that his 7-year-old son, Prince Louis, had been diagnosed with a serious condition requiring long-term care. What made this confirmation so powerful was its raw honesty. William didn't read from polished press lines. He spoke with the heavy weight of a father facing reality. In a voice that cracked with emotion, he acknowledged that this was not a routine illness or temporary setback, but a condition that would impact Louis's life in meaningful and lasting ways. A truth that instantly shifted public focus from speculation to empathy. The world watched and listened as one of Britain's future kings revealed something deeply personal: his own child's health struggle, breaking the usual royal restraint. The reaction was immediate. Social media stalled, newscasters paused mid-sentence, and millions around the globe felt the gravity of the moment. In that solemn message, William didn't hide behind royal protocol. Instead, he brought forward the reality of a family confronting a challenge all parents fear. Catherine, too, was present by his side, and her influence became clear. This announcement was a mother's choice first and foremost, rooted in love rather than image. This was not a palace announcement detached from feeling. It was truth, delivered in human terms, the kind of truth that unites strangers in shared concern. For viewers around the world, this wasn't another headline about royalty. It was the story of a child facing a life-changing diagnosis, told by parents whose priorities had shifted irrevocably toward care, protection, and honesty. And in that shift, the public saw not distant figures, but a family confronting a real, difficult moment together, bridging the gap between palace walls and everyday life. What the palace said. The official statement. When the official statement arrived from Kensington Palace, the tone was strikingly different from the usual royal announcements. There were no euphemisms, no carefully guarded language, no distant protocol. Instead, Prince William spoke in terms that were deeply personal, acknowledging both his son's diagnosis and the long path ahead. Rather than framing the situation as under observation or being monitored, the palace communicated that Louis's condition would require ongoing support and long-term care, making clear that this was not a temporary issue that would soon disappear. William's words carried the weight of a father's fear and love, and Catherine's presence reinforced that this message came from two parents equally devoted to their son's well-being. Her voice wasn't that of a princess. It was that of a mother choosing honesty over silence. This statement also broke the silence that had gripped Kensington for weeks, one that had left royal watchers and the public alike waiting, concerned and curious. There was no brushing aside, no diplomatic spin, no attempt to minimize the situation. Instead, the palace acknowledged the reality in clear, compassionate terms, showing that when it comes to family health, the truth demands to be spoken plainly, not hidden behind tradition. This was not a royal press release. It was a family telling the world what mattered most. In doing so, they invited global support, empathy, and understanding at a moment when they needed it most. In a world where royal statements are often measured, polished and strategic, this one stood out for its honesty and humanity, placing the emotional welfare of a child above all else, and signaling to millions that although Louis's future may be different than once imagined, he is supported with love, transparency, and fierce parental devotion. Silent signs. Before the storm. Before the announcement, before the leak, before the heartbreak, there were signs. Not loud, not obvious, but unmistakable to those watching closely inside Kensington Palace. In the early weeks of September 2025, whispers began to travel through the palace halls. Staff moved slower. Corridors that once echoed with children's laughter seemed quieter, more cautious. Subtle changes appeared on the official calendar. Events involving the Wales family, particularly those expected to feature young Prince Louis, were cancelled quietly, without public explanation. Behind closed doors, long-serving aides exchanged hushed glances. Something had shifted. Conversations were shorter, smiles thinner, and there was a growing sense that something deeply personal was unfolding. Even among senior staff, access to the children's quarters became more restricted. The joyful rhythm of royal life was slowing down. Then came the external signs, ones the public didn't immediately catch. Catherine began attending engagements without her usual presence of ease. Her speeches were polished, but her expression often seemed elsewhere. And William, usually poised and disciplined, appeared withdrawn during several public events in late September. Behind their composed faces was a mounting anxiety, one they hadn't yet shared with the world. Inside their home, the atmosphere had already changed. Staff recalled how Louis's usual playfulness faded. He rested more. He chose to sit quietly when he once ran wild. His booming laughter, so often the heartbeat of the household, grew softer. To outsiders, it could be dismissed as growing up, but to Catherine, it was a red flag. The family's usual outings grew rare. Louis was missing from several photo opportunities that had traditionally included all three children. On social media, royal watchers asked, "Where is Prince Louis?" The silence from the palace only deepened curiosity and worry. But inside, the answer was already clear. The silence wasn't hiding scandal. It was hiding uncertainty, waiting for clarity, and bracing for a truth that would change everything. And the moment that brought that truth into focus? It happened on a cold October morning at the bottom of the stairs. The moment Catherine knew something was wrong. It was an ordinary morning in early October 2025. Cold, crisp, and quiet. The Wales children were preparing to leave for school, their routine as normal as ever. But then came a small moment that Catherine would never forget. As Prince Louis came down the stairs, he paused, not to play, not to joke, but to catch his balance. He touched the railing, and his hand trembled. It was subtle. To anyone else, it might have meant nothing. But for a mother watching closely, it meant everything. Catherine rushed over. She fixed his collar, kissed his forehead, and smiled. Louis smiled back, unaware of her fear. But that one moment lodged itself deep in her chest. It wasn't clumsiness. It wasn't tiredness. It was something else. And she knew it. That very day, without fanfare or panic, Catherine quietly requested a private medical evaluation. She kept the arrangements out of the public eye. There were no motorcades, no special security protocols. She wanted discretion, and she got it. Only a handful of trusted aides were involved. What followed were weeks of hushed hospital visits conducted under the strictest confidentiality. Catherine, while continuing her public duties, juggled emotional exhaustion with royal responsibilities. She smiled at events, waved to crowds, even delivered speeches, while mentally waiting for her phone to buzz with another medical update. At night, her anxiety lingered in the halls. Every cough, every faint noise from the children's wing sent her heart racing. Even Princess Charlotte, just 10 years old, seemed to sense something. She began staying closer to Louis, holding his hand in the garden, sitting next to him longer at bedtime. No one told her what was happening, but she knew. Meanwhile, William remained unaware of the full extent for a short time. Catherine chose to carry the weight alone, not out of secrecy, but because she needed answers before she gave him fear. But eventually, the pieces connected. The mood had shifted. The children were quieter. The palace was different. Something heavy had arrived. What started as a pause on the stairs became a storm behind the scenes. A storm Catherine tried to hold off, even as it grew louder with every passing day. And then, the envelope arrived, sealed, final. The diagnosis was no longer a fear. It was a fact, and Catherine was the first to read it. The diagnosis that changed everything. The envelope arrived in mid-November 2025, just after 8:30 a.m., slipped discreetly into a private folder on Catherine's desk. The air outside was cold, the windows frosted. Inside her study, the silence was thick. She was alone when she opened it. No aides, no cameras, no William. Only a single sheet of paper, carefully worded, with a conclusion that would change the future of her youngest child forever. The words were clear, clinical, and irreversible. Prince Louis, just 7 years old, had been diagnosed with a condition that was not terminal, but permanent. It would require lifelong care, specialized treatment, and constant attention. His world, and theirs, would need to adjust around it. Catherine didn't cry, not then. She sat still, hands folded, staring at the page as light from the window hit her shoulder. No panic, no screams, just a mother absorbing the weight of a truth she had feared for weeks. That evening, Prince William returned from a public engagement in Manchester. He found Catherine in her study, still seated, the report in her hands. She didn't speak right away. She passed it to him silently. William read it twice. His face changed, but like Catherine, he didn't break. There was no royal decorum in that moment, just two parents trying to breathe through something they couldn't fix. "Whatever it takes, we do it together," he finally said. And in that sentence, the shift became real. Their lives were no longer just about duty, crowns, or cameras. They were now about protecting a child whose innocence had just been confronted with an adult reality. In the days that followed, everything moved quickly, but not loudly. Schedules were revised, phone calls made, quiet plans set in motion. Doctors were consulted, specialists were briefed, but not a word of it reached the press. The palace moved with the kind of precision that only happens when fear meets discipline. Catherine operated like someone carrying glass, deliberate, focused, breakable, yet unyielding. This diagnosis didn't just affect Louis, it reshaped the rhythm of the entire household. And for the first time in a long while, royal titles didn't matter. This was about a boy who would face a different path than anyone had expected, and the parents who would walk every step with him. Family adjusts behind palace walls. After the diagnosis, the royal machine didn't roar. It reorganized in silence. Behind the high gates of Kensington Palace, everything began to change. Not dramatically, not publicly, but with surgical precision. Because when the lives of royalty shift, they shift in whispers, not chaos. One of the first decisions was privacy. Louis's school schedule at Thomas's Battersea was quietly adjusted. Without public notice, he began attending shorter hours. Special accommodations were introduced discreetly. The aim wasn't to hide him, it was to protect his energy, his mind, and his emotional state. Inside the palace, aides were retasked. Rooms near the children's wing were reassigned. Security protocols tightened, not out of fear of threat, but to minimize disruptions. Fewer people, fewer questions, fewer eyes. Even the most loyal staff noticed the shift. Hallways once full of sound grew quieter. Doors once left open were now kept shut. Catherine scaled back her royal duties. Official appearances were postponed or quietly removed from schedules. William did the same, stepping in only when absolutely necessary. Their home transformed into something the monarchy rarely allows, a safe, unpublic space. One senior aide described the atmosphere as delicately tense. Everyone moved with caution. Conversations behind closed doors were measured. No one asked questions unless they had to. Because the truth was out, and it was painful. This wasn't a PR crisis. It wasn't a scandal. It was something far more personal. A child's health, a family's adjustment, and a new way of living that couldn't be managed by tradition. At the center of it all stood Catherine. She was no longer just Princess of Wales. She became the stabilizer, the organizer, the calm in the middle of a quiet storm. While William handled external obligations, she stayed home, managing doctors, schedules, emotions, and making sure Louis's world didn't collapse under the weight of change. Yet even as adjustments were made, the outside world remained unaware. Photos of the family still appeared occasionally in the media, carefully chosen, tightly controlled. But Louis's presence grew rare. Public appearances became almost non-existent. And though no official statement had been made, those watching closely knew something was wrong. But still, the palace held the line. Because this wasn't just a family matter. This was the future of a royal child. And the question wasn't just how they would handle it, but how long they could keep it private. That answer was coming soon, because outside the gates, curiosity was growing, and it was about to break through. The leak that threatened control of the story. No matter how carefully the palace planned, the silence couldn't last forever. On December 4th, 2025, the unthinkable happened. What began as a routine entry in a hospital system log turned into a wildfire. Just after 9:17 a.m., a low-level clerk noticed a private patient file connected to a high-profile name, Prince Louis. The access wasn't intentional, but in royal circles, even a pause on the wrong screen can trigger a crisis. That same day, without context or confirmation, a tabloid journalist began making calls. The palace press office, already on edge, received a direct query. "We've heard there are health concerns involving the young prince." The staff didn't confirm, but they didn't deny either. That hesitation was enough. Within hours, speculation began leaking into the media. First came the vague headlines, "Unconfirmed reports swirl around Prince Louis," and "Palace staff tighten protocols, but why?" Then came the wave of social media guesses. Was it behavioral? Was it physical? Was something wrong? Inside Kensington Palace, the reaction was immediate and devastating. Catherine was informed at 2:30 p.m. while working quietly in her private quarters. Witnesses said her face went pale. William stood in silence, then reportedly whispered, "It started," because they both knew what came next. The moment control of the story slipped away, the public narrative would no longer belong to them. Every detail of Louis's life, his condition, his treatment, would be up for dissection by strangers. Not because they wanted fame, but because privacy was about to be lost. What made it worse was the timing. The family was not ready to speak. Plans were still being made. Support systems were still being built. And most importantly, Louis didn't fully understand what was happening yet. But now, that choice, to speak in their own time, was being stolen. And Catherine, who had carefully carried this secret for months, realized she had no option left. "If the story breaks," an aide recalled her saying, "it breaks from me." That night, the palace was quiet. Not out of fear, but out of strategy. Because by the next morning, Catherine was ready to take back the narrative before someone else rewrote it for her. The decision to speak. Catherine's moment. For weeks, Catherine had carried the weight of Louis's diagnosis alone. She smiled for the cameras. She attended events. But behind the scenes, she lived with a growing sense of urgency. Every day they delayed the announcement, the greater the risk that someone else would expose the truth first. William, ever protective, offered more than once to release the statement under his own name. "Let me do it," he said gently one night. "You don't need to carry this." But Catherine shook her head every time. This wasn't about duty. This was about motherhood. The palace communication team drafted multiple versions of the statement. Some wrapped the news in vague formality. Others suggested coded phrases like adjusting schedules and seeking continued medical support. Catherine read them all. She rejected every single one. None of them sounded like her. None of them sounded like Louis. In the early hours of December 9th, 2025, long before the sun rose over London, Catherine sat alone in a small room overlooking the gardens. She picked up a pen, not a laptop, not a speech draft, and began writing on paper. She wrote slowly, deliberately, choosing every word as a mother, not a royal. The letter didn't include medical details. It didn't use technical terms. It simply shared the truth. Prince Louis had been diagnosed with a condition that would require long-term care, and the family was asking for compassion and privacy as they adjusted. At 8 a.m., William read the note. He didn't suggest changes. He simply nodded. No edits. No second draft. He understood this wasn't about image. It was about love, honesty, and dignity. Senior members of the royal family were informed shortly after: King Charles, Princess Anne, and Queen Camilla. None objected. None asked her to change a word. Because in that moment, everyone recognized the truth. This wasn't a royal announcement. It was a mother's voice. At exactly 9:30 a.m., the palace released the statement publicly. And just like that, the world stopped again. Headlines across the UK and beyond froze in place. Social media quieted. News anchors adjusted their tones. And for the first time in weeks, speculation turned to support. Because Catherine didn't speak like a princess, she spoke like a mother who refused to let strangers tell her child's story. And in doing so, she reclaimed the narrative, not for the crown, but for her son. But even as the message settled in, one question remained: how would the world respond? That answer came within hours, and it was nothing anyone expected. The world listened. Impact of the confirmation. When the clock struck 9:30 a.m. on December 9th, 2025, the statement from Catherine, Princess of Wales, was released. And within minutes, the world paused. There were no leaks, no spin, no unnamed sources this time. Just a direct, honest message from a mother, asking for space and kindness. She confirmed what royal watchers had feared, but couldn't say out loud. Prince Louis's health had changed, and their family's world had changed with it. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. The usual swarm of speculation, replaced by a rare wave of compassion. From London to Edinburgh, Sydney to Toronto, public response poured in. Major news outlets softened their tones. Headlines that typically leaned into scandal instead carried words like bravery, strength, and love. Social media turned quiet for a moment. Hashtags trended not with judgment, but with support. Protect Prince Louis. Eyes. Stand with Catherine. Within the first 6 hours, over 2.5 million messages of support were recorded across platforms. Floral tributes appeared outside Kensington Palace and Windsor Castle, not because of death, but because of shared grief and empathy. Catherine's words had landed like a stone in a still pond, ripples of understanding reaching every corner of the globe. Even longtime royal critics stepped back. Political commentators, known for dissecting every move the royals made, chose instead to acknowledge the raw humanity behind the announcement. One broadcaster said on live TV, "For once, it's not about crowns and titles. It's about a family and a boy who didn't ask for the spotlight." And that was the power of the moment. This wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a cover-up. It wasn't spin. It was truth, spoken directly, softly, and bravely. But the most profound change wasn't seen on screens. It was felt inside the palace. Staff, shaken but relieved, moved with new clarity. There were no more secrets, no more guessing. Everyone now knew what the family was protecting and why. The narrative had shifted. No longer was this about hiding the truth. Now it was about defending it. Because even with the flood of kindness, the pressure wasn't gone. Paparazzi still hovered. Journalists still circled. But Catherine had done something powerful. She set the tone, and the world listened. Still, the hardest part was yet to come. Because now that the diagnosis was public, a new reality was taking shape. And it wasn't just about what the family had been through, but about what Prince Louis's future would look like from here on out. What this means for Louis and the monarchy. The announcement changed everything, but it also raised one urgent question. What now? At just 7 years old, Prince Louis's life has been reshaped. His condition, as confirmed by Catherine's heartfelt message, requires lifelong care, emotional stability, and a world designed to support, not pressure, him. For William and Catherine, that means re-evaluating every part of their lives. Louis's education will be tailored to his needs, with discussions underway about private in-house tutoring. His public appearances will become rare, based solely on what he can handle, not what tradition expects. And most importantly, his privacy will be protected like never before. The palace has already warned media outlets. His medical journey is off limits. But this shift isn't just about one child. It's about a family changing course. Royal duties are being restructured and future plans paused. The guiding question now: is this best for Louis? The monarchy itself faces a new reality. Prince Louis will not grow up as a royal figurehead, but as a child first. One who deserves peace, protection, and dignity. In doing so, the Wales family may be quietly rewriting what it means to be royal. not through tradition, but through love. This moment redefines royalty. Compassion first, privacy protected. Prince Louis's path changes everything, and the crown must change with him now.